Broadcasting live from Lothal. Good morning, Lothal. It's the Unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Good Morning Lothal, the Unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast. I'm Pete Salas, along with
Rolando Zamora.
How you doing, Rolly?
I'm good. We got another great episode to talk about today. I'm really loving season 2 so far. Am I right?
I'm gonna call it. I don't think it's gonna top this season. Episode 2, this one that we're about to talk about. I don't think this is probably the best episode that I've seen of Rebels so far. So it's gonna have to hit a certain high bar in order to surpass this one. Just my opinion.
Dude, and now that we're rewatching with detail and not just kind of binge watching or watching casually, it just makes the moments and the great episodes that much greater. Last week I mentioned I was getting the hair standing up on my arm talking about a specific scene. I don't remember which one. Dude, this one right off the bat, just getting into the mix, because mind you, this is a part 2, so you're just jumping right into the action where we left off of the first one, and it was just man, I was getting excited and typing out the outline, the specific lines that I want to talk about.
No kidding, man. I mean, it starts with Vader's breathing. That's all I gotta say. It starts that's how the first thing you hear is Vader's breathing. But before we get to all that, which again we will be talking about season 2, episode 2. It's called The Siege of Lothal Part 2. But before we get to all that, like I said, Rolly, what's happening around the galaxy?
Let's see what's happening this week in Star Wars.
All right, guys. So we got some bad news and good news. I'm always the type of person, let's start with the bad news first and let's end on a good note, right?
Okay.
So bad news for all you gamers out there, specifically the Star Wars gamers. I mean, that's why we're on a Star Wars podcast, right? The Knights of the Old Republic remake has been put on an indefinite pause. I know. I am disappointed with you guys out there. I love that video game series. I was hyped when they showed Revan in that game trailer. I don't remember when they debuted the trailer, but now I think the game was slated for 2024 already, which was kind of, we were gonna have to wait a while, but now it's just man, how long am I gonna have to wait before I get to play the remake of this great game?
Right.
And basically what I was reading is they laid off an art director and a design director this past week, and I think they were kind of shuffling things already, and that was kind of the culmination of what happened. Specifically, This was Aspire Media. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that game studio, but the only word that they gave is they're going to be looking for new contracts and development opportunities to pick up on the project that is KOTOR remake. So definitely was a huge bummer hearing that this week.
There has to be more to it than that, dude, because they couldn't have gotten this far in development in order for it to just shit the bed. It doesn't make any sense for them to, yes, okay, creative differences, I get that happens in production, that happens in business, but for them to get this far, to already have a working, just to put out a teaser trailer for the most part, and have them say, okay, well, now we're going to lay off our art director. There's got to be more to it than that. We're not getting the full story, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that. I mean, they had to have been so far in development to some extent to drop a teaser trailer and basically set a timeline for the project. So yeah, that's a huge bummer. So I mean, hopefully we hear something new here soon, but I mean, I don't know. I guess I knew I was gonna have to wait anyway, so I guess what it comes down to is I'm just gonna have to download the original game and play it again.
I was gonna ask you, did you play the original game? Because I didn't.
So I remember I had a PlayStation 2 back when the first Xbox came out, so I actually got an Xbox later, and one of the first games I bought was actually KOTOR 2, Knights of the Republic 2, and I never played the first one until flash forward years later. I think I borrowed a copy and I played it from there, and I was like, wow, but actually both of these games are great. I think part 2 doesn't get talked about that often, but it is a really great game. It's just the first one, it has such a big platform for Revan, and it's a fan loved character. I hope that we see Revan in live action soon. I know we will. He was supposed to come out in Clone Wars, which we can talk about sometime, but it actually ended up being a cut. So I'm certain that Dave Filoni is going to bring that character to light here in the near future, and I think it would just be such a great medium to explore, because we haven't gotten anything TV show live action canon of Knights of the Old Republic, and it's such a great story. Anybody who has played this game, and if you haven't played this game, I wouldn't wait for the remake to come out. I think it's on Steam on PC for like $5. I think you can even download it like on Nintendo Switch. I'm sure there's plenty of outlets for you to get a hold of this game at a very affordable price. Forget the graphics. This game came out early 2000s. The story is so great. So I would recommend it to any of our listeners and viewers out there who have not been able to play it.
Yeah, that's definitely a game that went past my radar or off my radar, however you want to say it, back when it did come out. But I was looking forward to this remake or this remastered version or whatever it was, but to come to find out that it's been held off indefinitely, then I guess I'll have to wait a little bit longer. But that kind of goes back to the what we were talking about last week, the Acolyte that features the High Republic, then the Old Republic, the High Republic. That whole era of the Star Wars lore, I guess, is so in the dark for me that I was just kind of hoping to use these new mediums to catch up, but I guess I'm going to have to wait just a little bit longer. So,
all right. So, in the good news that we have, Pete mentioned this show a couple of weeks back. Light and Magic has now come out on Disney Plus as of July 27th, I believe.
Yeah, just a few days
I think that's
ago.
correct. So, like we mentioned before, it's a 6-part miniseries about Industrial Light and Magic, which, if you guys don't know, is the studio that basically was able to do all the visual effects, audio, anything and everything related to the original Star Wars trilogy, and it was created by George Lucas himself, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
so
it is a badass look at the behind the scenes people that created this magic that we all have come to know and love all these years later. And it's a 6-part series, like you said. I have not started it. I plan to start it tonight, actually, after we start recording. I've cleared my schedule, and I'm probably going to knock out maybe the first half of it tonight. That's my plan.
Yeah, that's my plan. That's my homework for this week. I'm assigning it to myself. So next week we are talking about that show, at least a bit of it. So be prepared for that. And on that note, I just wanted to add you're so heavily mentioning the behind the scenes magic. I don't know if you guys, maybe some of the younger audience out there is a bit spoiled with when they put on the original trilogy, the effects just look so seamless. You really have to put it in perspective of movies that were coming out back then that was like trying to do the same thing, and it just wasn't the same.
Right.
I think of things like RoboCop, where it's just like, when I was a kid, it looked awesome on screen, and then you go back and watch it, and it's just like, it's just not smooth effects. I think of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie. I thought that was amazing when I saw it in theaters, and then I go back and watch it, and the graphics are just like not good. And mind you, that movie came out in the 90s, and I'm not saying they had the production value or the money that Star Wars did, but I'm just trying to compare like apples to apples as far as like modeling. Like ILM developed insane, like just handmade models, and there's nothing computer about it. But you go back and you watch some of these scenes from the original trilogy, like the Millennium Falcon being chased in the asteroid field in The Empire Strikes Back, the Death Star trench run, that whole battle sequence of the Battle of Yavin, and it's like I can't even still to this day fathom how that is all done with just like models, because it just looks so real. Right. And that movie came out in 1977, which is just still to this day is insane for me.
No, that's a good point. And it's kind of like the best way to compare it is the groundbreaking like graphics and CGI before that was even a thing, because computers weren't even a thing.
Yeah,
was kind of like, if you want to think of like Clash of the Titans or King Kong.
Yeah, there you go.
Or all the Ray Harryhausen. Look him up. Google. Throw that in your Google machine. He was one of those puppeteers that kind of innovated that stop motion animation with puppets, and that was like groundbreaking at the time. So you fast forward maybe a decade later to the Star Wars era, the 77, 76 era. It was like a whole, just completely blank canvas to restart on. And that's what these ILM people, ended up doing. And that's why I'm so thankful that they're finally shining a spotlight. More so that, like, I guess what I'm saying is ILM and all the geniuses behind them, they deserved well more than just a bonus feature on a DVD. Like, they deserved an entire documentary series, so I'm really looking forward to starting this one.
Oh yeah, without them, like our visualization, the magic that we get to see on screen, and the love that we have for Star Wars it's just not the same. I mean, maybe we would have read it in a novel, but to see it on screen, to see it brought to life, that just brings things to a whole different level. So a lot of credit to the people at ILM.
Hell yeah.
All right, let's get into some birthdays this week. First, we have Donnie Yen, July 27th. He played Chirrut Imwe in Rogue One. You guys might remember him as the blind protector of the Jedi Temple there on Jeddah when they were harvesting the planet for kyber crystals. The bigger, the fans of Donnie Yen in general might remember him as Ip Man, more importantly.
Yeah. And all the sequels that came.
Exactly. I love that character. I was rewatching that clip where they kind of like take him hostage and they put the bag over his head and he's like, "Are you kidding me? I'm blind." I absolutely loved that character though in that movie.
For a movie that had so many standout like characters that we've just met for the first time on screen, I think he definitely stood out as one of my favorites. If nothing else, then just not that he was not a Jedi, but he believes so strongly in the Force and the Jedi code that he adopted it, upon himself to follow it, even in his just daily life, like going forward. And that is one of those things that kind of like at least once or twice a year, like when I'm feeling down or some weird shit happens in the world and like I just feel like I need to pick me up, I will constantly reshare on some sort of social media platform the infamous line that I had never heard uttered before him, which is, "I am one with the Force is with me." And that is a mantra that I have carried, since I heard it. Like it's one of those things that just kind of helps me feel better in times when I'm low. And, granted, this is a fictional character in a fictional world, in a fictional movie that's set in space. But it's so deeply ingrained in me. That sentiment alone, "I am one with the Force is with me," and I would have never heard that sentence uttered if it wasn't for this character right here, played by Mr. Donnie Yen.
I'm glad you shared that with me because I remembered maybe just like a month and a half ago, you were mocking me when I said that whenever Yoda speaks, I feel like he's speaking directly to me.
I don't think I mocked you, but whatever. I'll take it for the sake of argument.
No, I love that mantra too. I loved it as soon as Donnie Yen said it in Rogue One, but I loved it even more when they showed the season 7 of Clone Wars and Ahsoka said it when she was pulling the inhibitor chip out of Rex. So I was like, oh man, not only did you pull it from Rogue One into the animated series, kind of reverse, because we see animated series going into the live action, but you did it with my favorite character, and it's just like it. And she's a Jedi, mind you. Donnie Yen's character, like we were just saying, he's not a Jedi, so it's more like a prayer for him, and I guess you can kind of say. But for her, she's a Jedi for all intents and purposes. She's like the god that's honing the Force, and she still, is using the same mantra. So I thought that was super cool. Another birthday we had was Gary Kurtz, July 27th. He is one of the original film producers for A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. So a lot of credit to him. We were talking about the people at ILM being such a huge, factor into Star Wars. Gary Kurtz is certainly one of them as well, being the film producer. Here's one that's really cool for me because I recently discovered him in the past year or so. Drew Karpyshyn, July 28th. He is the writer of the Darth Bane trilogy, and I've mentioned that series on this show so many times, specifically the first book, Path of Destruction. Guys, do yourselves a favor, get the audiobook, read the book. It is insane. If you love the Sith, read this book. It'll just it's nuts. I've never been like a heavy reader. I will confess I did audiobook on this, but I've never seen or read a book where it's just like nonstop action and pure Sith, like full on. The hatred keeps building throughout that book. It's insane. It's awesome. So happy birthday to Drew Karpyshyn. And last but not least, we have Michael Biehn. Am I pronouncing that right, Pete?
Michael Biehn, yeah.
Michael Biehn, July 31st. He plays Lang on season 2 of The Mandalorian. You might remember him more importantly as Kyle Reese from the Terminator universe.
Right. That's what I was going to say in case you didn't. But yeah, I completely forgot that he was on in The Mandalorian until I read these notes. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. He did come out. Great
yeah,
actor.
that little showdown with Din Djarin when Ahsoka was dueling the magistrate. I think that was her name.
Yeah.
He was kind of like the right hand person for that character, and he's the one that ends up getting into a pistol duel with Din Djarin, the Mandalorian.
Right. He's a very underrated actor, and you don't see him as much as you'd like to, but when he does pop up and stuff like this, especially stuff like this, it's a welcome surprise. So happy birthday to Mr. Michael Biehn. Okay, so moving forward, before we segue into what we're all here for, which is Star Wars Rebels, we wanted to kind of touch base on something that just happened this past week that was kind of cool. Rolly, we were featured in another person's podcast and a whole other podcast besides ours, and you were part of that. So you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned to you guys recently, me and a couple of friends, we opened a store for sneakers and collectibles. So this gentleman, his name was Mark. Shout out to Mark. He wandered into our store our opening weekend, and he was kind of like looking around, looking at the sneakers, right? And he turns out he has a podcast called the Chew and Ooh podcast. Chew for Chewbacca and Ooh as in Ewok, EW. So he asked us if we wanted to come on the show to promote the store, and I mentioned that I actually have a podcast also, and he's like, "Oh, cool! Like we can talk about the podcast on the show." So we recorded this week, and funny story, I got to reiterate this because if you guys tune in to watch it, you're going to notice that it's just me. It's not Pete. So I didn't find out till that day that I was actually going to get like a whole segment of the show to talk about our podcast. Right. So it wasn't just about the store with the splash, with the plug for Good Morning Lothal, but it was actually, no, talk about your podcast. So I called Pete like immediately that morning, like if you can make it, please come out. But if not, and you watch it, I'm sorry, but I didn't know we were going to get a whole segment to talk about Good Morning Lothal. And it was a live podcast. So I gotta admit to you guys, I was kind of intimidated. I'm not the most outspoken person. This podcast has really brought out my personality to be more, on the outside as opposed to the inside. So when I got there before we recorded, I was like, that'll be fine, right? We've done like 16 episodes of Good Morning Lothal.
Right.
I'm not nervous, but
don't worry.
I got this. Exactly. And then I saw that it was live, like we were about to go live. I was like, so luckily, once it was my turn to talk, I didn't freeze or anything like that. Right. It actually ended up being like a really awesome podcast. Pete joined in, we have a live chat. So he was there nonetheless. But again,
my 2 cents.
Yeah, if you guys want to check that out, it is on the latest episode of the Chew and Ooh podcast. It is on YouTube the same way we are, and also all audio platforms. So you can.
I'll post a link right here in our little thing at the bottom.
Yeah. And once again, shout out to Mark down from that podcast. Really appreciate you inviting us on the show and letting us promote Good Morning Lothal.
Yeah, no, that was really cool. I mean, granted, I was not like on the air with you, which is fine. I mean, thank you. I really appreciate you calling me and being like, hey, man, if you can make it, make it. But I just heard about it right now. And you did all your due diligence to make sure that I didn't feel left out. And I really appreciate that.
Oh, dude, like I've said before, I'm spoiled on Good Morning Lothal because I just get to show up and talk Star Wars. Do I write the outline? Sure. But ultimately, me writing the outline is still talking about Star Wars. Pete does all the heavy lifting to make this show possible. So shout out to Pete also.
Thank you. No, it was really cool to just kind of like sit back and be an audience member and listen to you. And like, honestly, Rolly, I was really proud of you, dude. You did pretty well. You did pretty good to, supporting our show and talking about us and, knowing, obviously you knew your stuff about Star Wars, but you held your own. And I was really like, it made me feel like, excited to just kind of sit back and listen to other people talking about us. It kind of almost in a small way felt like we made it, we officially made it. But it was a good appearance, and hopefully it gained us some new followers. So if you are here listening, thanks to the Chew and Ooh podcast, welcome to Good Morning Lothal. I guess this is a good time to also mention, if you're new to here, remember to like, share, and subscribe. That is how we grow this network. This is how we grow this podcast, and Rolly and I really appreciate it. So if you're here, thanks to the Chew and Ooh podcast, we thank you and we welcome you. So moving forward, before we get to started in what we're all here for, Rolly, we were talking about something that was kind of one of those, you get together with some friends, you have a beer or something, you start talking about, just random crap about things, just kind of like picking each other's brains. So this is one of those things that we were kind of doing. I had asked ahead of time, Rolly, if you lived in the Star Wars universe and you were take Jedi Master and take Sith Lord out of the equation, what job do you think you would have in the Star Wars universe?
Dude, I don't know whether to say there's so many options or there's so little growth. I think I think it's like the same category. I feel like if there's like a high class of society in I don't know, I take it back. There's a high class of society in the Star Wars universe, but I mean, take this back to like if you're a child and they ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? I kind of think of this question like that. You don't say like, well, I want to be a stock trader or work for a Fortune 500 company. It's like, no, you have aspirations of being like an astronaut or something,
right.
Something great. Or maybe you just wanted to ride the back of the garbage truck because they got to stand up on the truck. Because I'll be honest with you guys, I said that when I was a kid.
You wanted to be a garbage man?
Yeah, just because they got to stand on the back of the trucks when they picked up the garbage. So
that's funny.
Yeah, high hopes there. No, but man, I think of like so many cool things that I see on screen that are not related to Jedis. I think of like the people that they're doing the dirty work. They're working on the ships. So I think that would be a cool one. Even working in the cantina as a bartender, I think that would be fun too. But that seems kind of like I don't know, Pete, because like, man, like it seems like all jobs in the Star Wars universe are like highly dangerous. I don't know what
that's true.
Terminology is.
No, because like I think about like the current Kenobi series, and this is the first time we ever saw like drug dealers, drug like creators, like people that worked in like meth labs, so to speak, in the Star Wars universe. Like I never even thought of that there's street drugs in the Star Wars universe that get sold and whatnot. But
yeah, it's funny you say that because smuggler would be cool too. But then again, I'd get caught, get shot.
I mean, it's basically the Wild West is the Wild West in space. So it's hard to say. The easy answer would be to be like working behind the bar as a bartender. That seems to be that's a constant in almost every iteration of Star Wars. At some point, they go into some sort of a pub or a bar or something, and there's always a bartender there. But I don't know. Maybe given your engineering background, maybe you would be working like not like building the Death Star, but like designing it, possibly.
Oh man, so you're basically telling me I'm one of those engineers that gets lined up in Rogue One and then just gets shot down for not being a traitor.
Hey man, I call it as I see it, and in this world, I'm saying you're still as brilliant as you are in real life. So maybe you could be designing the Death Star.
It just reminded me of a future episode of Rebels where it's the same scenario. There's engineers that basically they're punished for somebody else's, treachery. Okay, and you don't want to be an engineer in the Star Wars universe if I've learned anything from everything that I've seen. What about you? What would you like to be?
Well, I think that given my skills in real life, maybe I would be working on those propaganda films that the Empire puts out, just kind of like just shooting and editing
on the holonet.
Yeah, for the holonet news, like, the Empire is here to help you, that type of thing. Maybe I could be a voiceover guy for the Empire. I don't know, possibly.
There you go. At least you're like not in the line of fire, unlike the people that are just trying to make an honest living in the Star Wars universe. I mean, you're working for the bad guys.
Yeah, I wouldn't be a dirt farmer, a sand farmer. I wouldn't be. I would try not to lean towards the legal, underworld kind of scenario, but. I guess if I had to use my actual skills, maybe like, Good Morning Lothal, like I would actually have a real radio station morning show there, to entertain the masses. You never know.
Yeah, but it'd have to be for the Empire, because if you're on the other end, like the Bridgers, well,
right.
Clearly, if you try to do anything right in the Star Wars universe, the chances of you getting shot are pretty high. So I guess just join the Empire and you'll be fine.
Yeah,
just don't be on the Death Star.
Yeah, no. So anyway, that was just one of those little things. So I'm asking you guys, you listeners out there, if you were living in the Star Wars universe, as it were, what job, what skill do you think you could bring and, to help provide for you and your family? So we want to hear from you. Drop us a comment.
Dude, please comment. We gotta feature those on one of the next future episodes. I'd love to talk about that because I know we're missing a lot of stuff and I want to hear what other people have to say.
Right. Okay, so let's segue into Star Wars Rebels. Rolly, why don't you hit us with a synopsis of this week's episode?
So this week's episode is part 2, so please keep in mind what you saw from the previous episode. So this week, with the mission to gain intel from the now deceased Minister to a Compromise, the Rebels now find themselves engaged with the evil Sith Lord Darth Vader. After barely escaping with their lives, the rebels face the difficult decision to leave Lothal in order to prevent further persecution of its citizens as the Empire hunts them down. Ahsoka senses a familiar presence she has not felt since days long gone.
Excellent. So, yes, we start, like I said earlier, we start with the first thing you hear as soon as the show starts is Vader's infamous ominous breathing, and that just means that we pick up exactly where the last one left off. He is walking towards the band of rebels, lightsaber drawn and ready to fight, and sure enough he does. So the episode starts with Vader approaching the Imperial March playing, and it was kind of like a, what's it called when it's kind of like a downtone version of it, like almost like a, not a medley, but music.
Yeah, I'm not thinking of the word right now either.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't the actual official orchestral version. It was kind of just like a down tune, kind of an ominous version of it, which I really liked.
Yeah.
So he approaches them with that theme playing, and Kanan orders Hera to leave on the shuttle as they distract Vader. He easily manhandles Kanan and Ezra, telling Ezra, "Your master has deceived you into thinking you can become a Jedi," which was an awesome evil line. And you know that I'm a fan of awesome evil lines, especially when it's said by Vader, even more so when it's said by the great James Earl Jones. And Sabine sets explosives on nearby walkers, and Kanan and Ezra use the Force to topple the walkers onto Vader, they seemingly crushing him. They threw all this stuff on top of him, but that was not enough to kill him, obviously. They escape, and Vader Force pushes himself out of the rubble and survives. The team is surprised by his capabilities, and it does not seem like anything can kill him. So it was an awesome second half of the last episode, cliffhanger, where basically Vader comes in. And the first thing I noticed was they really like to, I guess that's Vader's fighting style, right? Where he's kind of like an overhand, kind of like a chopping axe kind of a motion with his lightsaber, because that's the first thing he goes right after Kanan with an overhead kind of a domineering, over him, trying to chop him down kind of a thing, which I appreciated because that is how they designed it in the Obi-Wan series. There was a lot of that overhand fighting, which I guess is kind of old school. I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about how, if there's like a difference in technique with Vader and Anakin. I guess there would have to be, because he's more machine now than human, as they say in the movies.
Right.
But yeah, that's a good point. And they do, now that I'm thinking about it, because you're mentioning it, they do a really good job of matching it across Rebels, Obi-Wan, the original trilogy,
Yes.
So that was pretty awesome. And I love the part also when he tells Ezra, "Your master has deceived you into thinking you can become a Jedi," because when he tells him that line, he has like Ezra like in a Force hold, like against the wall, and he's turning Ezra's own saber against him to his neck, and it gets like real dark in like the first like 10 seconds of this of this episode. Mind you, this is a kid's show.
Yeah, we can't stress that enough, that this was made for children back in the day. But damn it, if it isn't just some compelling television for us now with watching it, a rewatch.
Yeah, and then I also love the part when he breaks out of the rubble of all the walkers falling on him. I didn't remember that scene, but it was like a super awesome like looking scene that they did, where he's kind of like, they show him like Force gripping the walkers as he's like standing up. And I don't know if it's like the explosion or this fire behind them, but it was just like, it was really awesome. Like you could have that as like a background on your computer or phone, or just like a straight up painting on the wall. And I totally forgot about that. So after that, they show, like, the team does get away, like we said. They immediately show Ezra on the shuttle with the rest of the team, and he begins to question Kanan about Vader. not knowing who he was, and he asked if it was another Inquisitor, and Kanan proceeds to tell him far worse, a Sith Lord, an ancient enemy of the Jedi. Ezra proceeds to ask him, how can we fight him then? And Kanan goes, fight him? We were lucky to survive. So Hera proceeds to tell them that they have no choice but to leave Lothal, because now they're, if they're there, they're presenting a danger to everybody that's on the planet because they're going to be hunted. Sabine ends up suggesting that they need to smuggle themselves off of Lothal.
Yeah.
Hera cleverly proposes she knows the right person, and Kanan and Ezra immediately know who she's referring to, and both yell simultaneously, not him.
Right.
So we'll find out soon who we're talking about, but all you listeners out there who have been following along, I'm sure you know exactly who we're talking about. So after that, the scene cuts to Vader, and he's talking to Agent Kallus. And Kallus informs him that the rebels have not left the system, and like I just mentioned, Vader tells him to burn down the local refugee camp called Tarkin Town that the rebels have provided aid to in the past. He tells Kallus since the compassion of the rebels is a weakness, they intend to exploit it. So right away, that's, like I said, that's the reason why the Ghost's crew is saying we need to leave Lothal, because of all the actions, the consequences of all this are now anybody who gives any form of assistance to them, or anybody that gets in the Empire's way of them hunting the Ghost crew, they're gonna get cut down, and they're in immediate danger.
Right.
So after that scene, it cuts to Kanan and Hera contacting, you guessed it, Lando Calrissian for assistance so that they can get smuggled off of Lothal.
There he is.
And of course, in the same way that they cue the Imperial March for Vader anytime he shows up, you hear Lando's Palace, which is Lando's theme basically from Empire Strikes Back. So I always think it's like a nice little touch, like we mentioned in the last episode when they put the music. It really sets the tone for these characters that are making cameos and such.
Right, and let's not bury the lead. Lando's back. That means Mr. Billy D. Williams is back voicing him, which was awesome.
Yes. So of course Lando's a smuggler, right? He's not just going to help them all for free. So he asks for basically an exchange of goods to help them smuggle them off of Lothal. So remember that the rebels, as they were escaping Lothal, they did end up finding those military grade shield generators that they ended up loading onto the shuttle. So of course, that being a top dollar item, they offer that to Lando to help him, like half of the loot that they just got.
Right.
So Lando agrees, of course, but he tells them that he isn't on Lothal, but for the Ghost crew to go ahead and meet up with his droid, who is. So we see the rebels meet up with Lando's droid on Lothal. I think it's the same scene or the same meetup spot that we did see in Lando's episode a few episodes back. So basically, as they're approaching, Ezra immediately senses something's off, and he ends up seeing smoke in the distance, and he of course recognizes it immediately to be Tarkin Town. Tarkin Town, just as a reminder, it's an encampment of basically Lothal refugees who were ousted from their homes because of Grand Moff Tarkin. Tarkin Town is a reference to Grand Moff Tarkin. So it's like these are basically people that are just trying to make a second living after everything was taken from them from the Empire, and now Vader's squeezing them for everything that's left, which is pretty sad. So they show Ezra immediately jump onto a speeder, and he takes off, and Kanan allows him first of all, but he also proceeds to follow him. So they show Ezra arrive to Tarkin Town, and he's just observing the destruction, and he's shocked, but he's also kind of confused because all the people are gone. So Kanan proceeds to tell him that they're prisoners of the Empire now, and Ezra asks if all of this is because of the actions of the Ghost crew, and Kanan says, hey, there's a cost for any action we take now, Ezra. Things are getting worse just as they did back when I was your age, but back then there were 10,000 Jedi Knights protecting the galaxy. Now there's just you and me against an Empire. Ezra says, we can fight. We have allies. I'm not afraid. And Kanan says, that's what worries me. And I noted that line that Ezra says, I'm not afraid, it's actually a callback to The Empire Strikes Back when Luke tells Yoda he's not afraid to confront Vader. And right. Luke basically tells him, you will be. You will be. So I thought that was a cool callback.
No, that was a cool callback. And just to rewind just a tiny bit, that droid that they meet up with, Lando's droid, it seemed to me that the character design was, if you look back to what C-3PO was originally drawn as, and I think we're going back to the Ralph McQuarrie days.
Yeah,
that is exactly what he looked like, which kind of looked like that. There was a very old silent film, I think it's called Metropolis, where there's, I don't know anything about the movie other than the name of it, but one of the main images in that movie is a giant robot, and that's exactly what C-3PO was designed to look like. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, more or less that's what this droid, Lando's droid, was meant to look like too. So just another little tidbit there.
I need to go look that up here soon after we're done with the podcast, because now I'm curious. So getting back to Rebels, they show after Kanan and Ezra visit Tarkin Town, they regroup with the team back at Lando's camp, and they explain to the rest of the team exactly what they saw. So Hera says, then it's basically confirmed. We need to leave Lothal for good. Fortunately for them, as Ezra and Kanan were gone, Sabine ended up creating a plan to use these transponders that Lando has at his camp. And basically what she does is she's going to tune the signature codes for those transponders, to match the shuttles and use them to slip past the Empire unnoticed. So basically what she's proposing is these transponders, which what they end up doing is they release them into the air as they're traveling. So it's creating the shuttle signal like on all sorts of places. They're leaving a trail, so to say, so that the Empire doesn't know which signal to follow in order to track down the shuttle and try to capture them or execute them, whatever.
Right.
They show the team execute the plan. They're approaching the Star Destroyer, the blockades that the Star Destroyers have set up, and right away the Empire starts scrambling because they don't know which one to follow. So they release a bunch of TIE fighters. The TIE fighters are ordered to shoot down the transponders once they recognize that it's not the shuttle, and that'll allow them to hone in on the stolen Imperial shuttle. Right. Of course, they release so many of them that by the time they locate it, it's too late, and the team does manage to get away. So the team ends up escaping, like I just mentioned, with the help of the transponders, and they show Kanan, or rather they show the Ghost Crew having a conversation again, and Kanan asks if they can't go back to Lothal, where are we going to go now? And Hera goes, what are you talking about? We're part of the rebellion now. And Kanan says, are we? Are we all sure about that? Because from the previous episode, Kanan wasn't fully sold on them being part of the Phoenix Squadron, them being part of the Rebel Alliance at all. So now this is kind of the first time that they're going to have an open discussion with the team to see what the team thinks, if they're with Kanan or if they're with Hera on this one.
Yeah.
So they start with Sabine. Sabine actually suggests that, hey, maybe we just grab the Ghost and lay low for a while. But that's kind of her forte. Sabine is a very quiet person. She keeps to herself. She loves, taking action, but at the same time, she's not really part of a full-blown team. She loves the Ghost Crew. That's her family, right? But yeah, that's kind of her forte. You find out more about that in the future. Right.
She's either subdued and quiet or blowing shit up. It's one or the other.
Exactly.
There's no middle ground there with her.
They cut to Zeb, and he ends up saying, you know what, I actually like fighting with the Phoenix Squadron. It reminds me of the Lasat Honor Guard. So Hera proceeds to ask Ezra what he thinks, because Ezra's doing a lot of thinking to himself at this point. And Ezra actually says, we can't help Lothal now, which is a big shocker because Ezra is all about helping Lothal all the time. And he says, but I think the rebels can help us get stronger so we can go back and change things. I think we should stay with the rebel fleet. And I love this scene because Hera almost they don't say this, but if you guys remember, there's already been at least a couple of moments where Hera looks at Ezra and she reacts in a positive way to see him growing up, because Ezra, for all intents and purposes, is Ezra's new mom on this ship, and she's really proud of the steps that Ezra's taking to grow up, take responsibility. And I think this was the culmination of that. She basically said, I'm gonna ask Ezra's gonna give the right answer here. And mind you, Hera's not force sensitive, she's just a good leader.
Yes.
So she knows exactly what needs to be said, who needs to speak said words. So I thought that was a really cool moment that I just kind of wanted to point out there. So after that, the scene cuts to the Imperial officer reporting to Agent Callus and Darth Vader that the rebels got away. Vader informs Callus to have his ship repaired, and Callus informs the officer that there's a tracking device aboard the stolen shuttle, and he orders him to ready the fleet to deploy. So right away, even though the Ghost crew got away in the stolen shuttle, Vader had a backup plan, of course. Like, why wouldn't he, right?
Yeah.
I was ready for him to force choke the officer then and there, but I guess because the show was on Disney XD of all things,
right?
I was like, okay, I guess we're probably not gonna get a force choke just yet.
Not yet.
So the scene cuts yet again, and now we're back to the rebels meeting up with the rest of the fleet. So as soon as they dock and board the command ship, Chopper just starts, going nuts, and he immediately alerts the team that there's a tracker on the shuttle that was just activated as soon as they docked. So without even having any time to do anything else but board, Hera immediately, takes off to the command center and informs Commander Sato that the fleet needs to jump out of the area now, as Vader's TIE fighter enters the rebel sector and prepares to intercept the rebel fleet, which is nuts because Vader actually shows up on his TIE fighter. I think it's an advanced TIE fighter. I don't remember the class of TIE fighter, but it's the same TIE fighter from A New Hope, if you guys remember correctly.
Right. Instead of the straight up panels, it's got like the curved kind of a...
Yeah. So I was like, man, stuff's gonna go down because it's just him. Like, he didn't show up with the rest of the Imperial fleet, so he's gonna pull some stunts. And sure enough, that's what this leads to. So Commander Sato immediately orders the Phoenix Squadron to intercept, since it is simply a single fighter. Mind you, he doesn't know who's manning this ship.
Right.
So he deploys a bunch of A-Wings. At this point, the A-Wings are the only ships that we're gonna see for a while as part of this the Rebel Alliance, specifically to the Phoenix Squadron. Just a tease for future episodes. We do start getting, the ships that we're more familiar with, the X-Wings, the Y-Wings. We even get an episode of the B-Wing. I just want to give you guys a heads up. There's some really awesome stuff ahead. So Vader proceeds to actually start eliminating the A-Wings one by one, as well as attacking the command ship. And when I saw the scene, I was just like blown away. It was like some of the stunts he's pulling, it reminds me of Maverick from Top Gun. It's just like, there's one scene specifically where he stops the thrusters of the ship, and he kind of I don't know how to explain it. It's like Hawkeye when he jumps off the building of the Avengers and he just turns around and starts shooting the arrow. Yeah, it was Vader pulls this stunt in the air with the TIE fighter. He stops the engines, turns with gravity, and he starts shooting A-Wings out of the sky, which I thought was super awesome.
I mean, I'm not surprised, given that the prequels was not all about, but a big part of it was, explaining how Anakin is the best pilot in the galaxy, that kind of thing, and does all these rogue moves to kind of goes against the typical protocol for what a pilot should be, or how a pilot should be flying. So it only makes sense that Vader would be doing the same thing.
Yeah, and now that you're mentioning that, I remember the line. Of course, I always remembered that line, but I remember always thinking to myself, I was like, we never saw that. I don't feel like I ever saw that in the movies, aside from, I'll try spinning. That's a good trick.
You know what? Now that I guess I'm attributing it to Clone Wars, because I still count Clone Wars as part of the prequel trilogy.
They say it in the movies. You're right. They do say that he is the best starfighter. And I remember, because this was before I saw Clone Wars, and that's what I'm telling you. When they dropped that line, I remember seeing the films and thinking I don't think they ever showcased how good of a pilot he was. They show him flying in Revenge of the Sith with Obi-Wan, but they're kind of matched in their abilities. So I really like that you pointed out, because that's a good observation of what I'm talking about in this specific episode of Rebels. It's a really awesome sequence. So Commander Sato's just blown away, and he's wondering how one single fighter can fight against an entire Rebel fleet. And Hera informs him that, hey, you're outmatched. You don't know what you're dealing with. So she sprints towards the Ghost to get involved, because of course Hera is an excellent pilot. So we get to see a bit of more of that here. The rest of the crew ends up following along because they're going to help her man the guns and such. And I thought this was really interesting. They show Ahsoka ask Ezra if he minds if she tags along. Which
I did notice that. That stood out as okay. That was a little off, off base, I guess. But Yeah, that did.
Yeah, because Ahsoka's a Jedi. She's not like, what is she gonna do? Hera's the pilot, so right away I'm like, she knows, like she senses Vader's presence. She has to. So the team ends up taking their positions on the Ghost, and Hera, I put a note on this because I've said it since the first episode of Good Morning Lothal. Hera proceeds to drop this line.
Yeah.
All right, kids, do mom and dad proud.
Yep, I noted that too.
Yeah, and I did not remember that line ever since the beginning of our podcast, where I was calling Hera and Kanan the mom and dad of the Ghost Crew. So I'm glad that she herself does say it in one of the episodes. So Vader continues to proceed taking down the command ship's shields at this point. So now the command ship is completely vulnerable. One more shot and, they're just going to be blown out of the sky. And at that same time, Ahsoka begins to sense a familiar presence. So this alludes back to what I'm talking about. Like, why does she want to get on the Ghost? She knows something, and she wants to get closer to Vader's TIE fighter because she thinks she's onto something familiar. And Ahsoka proceeds to say, the Force is strong with him. Kanan, let's find out how strong. Just remember your training. And it was kind of a really cool moment because Kanan's kind of like a hard ass because he's been on his own. And and mind you, sure, he found Ezra, but Ezra's a Padawan. This is kind of the first time you see Kanan reconnecting with his past. He's with an experienced Jedi, and there's almost a sense of like soothness that Ahsoka gives to him in that moment. And it's almost like if Kanan takes a backseat and it's like, finally, like, I'm connecting with a Jedi I did not know survived. Yeah. Now I feel more confident in my abilities and not have to take the lead and like not know what I'm doing. So I thought that was a cool moment too. So Ahsoka and Kanan together reach out to the Force to figure out who exactly is manning the TIE fighter. Yeah,
there's a cool moment where he puts his hand on her shoulder and they both kind of reach out. And I've never actually seen that done before, where it's kind of like it's like a double-decker Force,
Yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking that too, but I don't know much about that, so I didn't want to comment on it and expand on something that I don't know anything about. Right. But yeah, there's got to be something to that because you're right. He does put his hand on her shoulder, and they're kind of doing it. Yeah, it's almost like together, like when the Ghostbusters cross the streams to make an even stronger proton pack stream. But anyway. So Ezra, because he's so force sensitive and so strong at this point, he starts sensing it also. And he says, there's something familiar. I think I feel cold. And mind you, he said this in the previous episode when Vader was around. And he says, you know what? I think I know who it is. Back on Lothal, I felt something. Kanan did too. The fear, the anger, the hate. It's the Sith Lord we faced. So they show Vader, and Ahsoka simultaneously connecting to the Force, and there's going to be a revelation at this moment. Yeah. So Vader immediately, once he hones in on it, he senses the presence of Ahsoka. Yes. And at the same time, Ahsoka senses Vader, but she knows. My favorite scene in this episode. I just love the way the animation was. He was like focused on fighting and flying. Yeah. And then all of a sudden the mask just turns and it's like they connect right there. You know what was really cool? I'm glad that you said that because I thought of this in that head turn that he does. It's almost like I saw Anakin head turn. That wasn't a Vader movement. That was like an Anakin movement. Yes, so I totally thought of that when I saw the episode, but I didn't write it in here, so I'm glad that you mentioned it. Like, Jesus, I'm a nerd. But anyways, hey, I saw it too, man. So don't worry. You're amongst good company. So in that moment that they both sense each other, Vader says the apprentice lives, because Vader till this moment thought Ahsoka was dead. That was the ending for Clone Wars Season 7. He picks up the saber. Ahsoka faked her death because she needed to stay hidden from Order 66. Now he knows that Ahsoka is alive. So Ahsoka also, makes the realization, and she screams in terror because she's not only sensing Anakin, she's sensing what has become of her former the master. Now he's just consumed with darkness. He's not the same person. He's not the same person rather from her past. Right. So she screams in terror and ends up fainting from the connection that she makes to Vader. So Hera and Kanan order Commander Sato to abandon ship. And as the Star Destroyers have now arrived to back up Vader in his attack of the Rebel fleet, Vader actually ends up ordering the Star Destroyers to block their escape but not attack them, as he is now in pursuit of the Ghost. So now that he senses Ahsoka, now he like turns the tide. The Ghost was pursuing Vader. He's flipped the script now. Now he's chasing the Ghost. So it's more important to him that these guys get captured, because, you know, there's three surviving Jedi aboard one single ship. Like, I don't know how many are in the galaxy at this point, but there's 3 of them here, and Vader's like that close to them. So Hera goes into attack formation on the Star Destroyers to distract them as Vader's chasing her, but she wants to distract the Star Destroyers so it allows Sato and the rest of the fleet to escape. You know, they're jettisoning off on escape pods from the command ship that's now going down. So they have to get onto the other, you know, cruisers before the Rebel fleet can escape to hyperspace. So the Star Destroyers end up setting like this formation where they're going to trap Hera with a tractor beam. Like, Hera, like, what are you waiting for? Punch the hyperdrive. We're going to get captured. So sure enough, right before they're able to lock in, Hera punches the Ghost to hyperdrive and they end up escaping. And what ends up happening is, since Vader's in pursuit, Vader's ship is actually the one that gets caught in the tractor beam.
Right.
So one of the Imperial, you know, officer, not the officer, but like, you know, one of the guys working in the command center, he tells them, we caught ship, but it was the wrong ship. So the Imperial officer is like, dude, his face just like, he's terrified, and he's like, we'll release it, because he knows it's Vader's ship, and he's just fearing for his life now. The scene cuts to Ahsoka sitting alone in the Ghost cockpit. So at this point, she's kind of recovered from going unconscious, and she actually requested to speak to Kanan and Ezra. So they walk in, and Ahsoka tells them, I wanted to ask you about the Sith Lord you encountered on Lothal. Kanan says, you know, we encountered an Inquisitor before, but this was nothing like that. The fear, the anger, the hate, you felt it. I haven't sensed a presence like that since. And then Ahsoka interrupts him and says, the Clone Wars. Ezra goes, Ahsoka, do you know who or what he is? And Ahsoka goes, no, I don't, but I do know that he will be coming. They'll all be coming now. Ezra goes, then we must be ready to fight. And Kanan chimes in, we must find the strength to fight, but the greater courage is knowing when not to fight. So, right, there you go. Kanan's starting to, you know, really hone in on his skills as a master. Now he's sounding a bit like Yoda there.
Yeah.
And as right when he says that, they show the rest of the Ghost crew enter the cockpit, and Hera goes, and we'll be beside you either way. So after that, I thought it was really cool because they cued the Ahsoka theme from the Clone Wars very subtly. At the same time, when they show that, you know, she said the line, I don't know who he is, right, but he'll be coming. But clearly, you know, she's conflicted. She's lying, yes, but she's conflicted because, number one, she's not absolutely certain, right? The last she saw Anakin, he was Anakin. He wasn't Vader. She didn't know anything about the dark side, you know, of that Anakin ended up going to. So she's just facing a lot of new feelings right now, and she doesn't know how to, you know, handle them. So I guess the instinct there was, I'm not going to say anything until I know for certain what's going on here. But at the same time, she's fighting herself because she's saying, that's my master, but, you know, Anakin's a good person. Who is this thing that he's become? Right. So definitely she's going through a lot of things in this moment, and she's going to try to unravel it as the season progresses. So that's the theme for this season, you guys, in case you haven't picked up on it here in these 2 episodes, the Ahsoka and Vader. So to end the episode, we cut to one final scene where Vader's entering the command bridge of the Imperial Star Destroyer, and he asks the officers to clear the room. And he does that because he's going to communicate with the Emperor, and they're going to talk about some, you know, specific detail stuff from Anakin's past, and of course, or from Vader's past, and of course, nobody is supposed to know that Vader is Anakin besides his master, who's Emperor Palpatine. The Emperor begins to speak to him, and he says, Lord Vader, have you dealt with the rebels in the Lothal system? And Vader goes, yes, Master, they are broken. The Emperor goes, and yet I sense in you something more to your victory. Vader says, I believe the apprentice of Anakin Skywalker lives and is in league with these rebels. The Emperor says, are you certain? And Vader says, it was her. The Emperor says, then this is an opportunity we cannot let pass. Skywalker's apprentice could lead us to other lost Jedi. And Vader proposes, such as Kenobi, and the Emperor goes, perhaps, if he lives. Be patient, my old friend. For now, dispatch another Inquisitor to hunt them down. Vader, as you wish, my master. And that's the end of the show.
Hell yeah. Damn, so many unanswered questions. Like, okay, so first of all, for people that like might not know, might be following along, why does Darth Vader refer to himself in the third person when he's talking about Anakin? And that, of course, goes back to the fact that he truly believes that Anakin is gone. Anakin was a whole other person. He is now what remains, I guess. But more than anything, what I got from that was the dispatch another Inquisitor. So what or who do you think that they're talking about, really?
Without giving too much away, because I know a lot about this season. It's Ahsoka related, so I don't want to give too many spoilers. We'll get into it real quick. But as you saw in the Kenobi series, for everybody that's seen it, there is not just a Grand Inquisitor. There are multiple Inquisitors. Right. So the Emperor, in my opinion, is just commanding him to dispatch another one to hunt them down. Hey, do the dirty work until they find them, and then we'll step in and capture them. My takeaway from that last conversation that Vader has with the Emperor is the part where the Emperor says Skywalker's apprentice could lead us to other lost Jedi, and Vader immediately kind of interrupts him and says, such as Kenobi. So I thought of the Kenobi series immediately because he's so hell-bent on finding Kenobi, and I don't feel like I knew that until I saw Kenobi.
Good point. Yeah.
And they're alluding to it here in Rebel Season 2. Like, I don't care about Ahsoka, who I just encountered. Ahsoka's gonna get me to Kenobi if he lives. Like, he's just like, it's already there. And mind you, this was years before the Kenobi series dropped. So I thought that part really caught me by surprise. The connection there. The guys are doing a hell of a job connecting the dots across all these series that are coming out, directed by different people and such.
Absolutely.
Thought that was a really good one.
Oh, absolutely. I picked up on that too, that it really did connect how at its core the Sith, besides anger and hatred and pain and suffering, it's revenge. They just got it in them that it's like they got to get revenge for whatever it is that whoever wronged them, and in this case it's Kenobi that basically destroyed him as a human. So that was an incredible episode, and it was a hell of a way to end it. My goodness, I don't think much more can be said about it other than this is the episode to beat as far as season 2 goes so far, and it's only episode 2, so
and you guys have heard me say this. I'm a Rebels fan through and through. It's my number one. I've stolen this from TikTokers who think the same way as me. They say it all the time, and I say it too. Rebels is peak Star Wars, and this episode exemplifies why I say that. If you're a fan of the original trilogy, you're a fan of the Clone Wars, these first 2 episodes are just bringing them together, and it's so awesome. Like, I remember, this is why I love this show so much. I could rewatch these episodes over and over again and not get tired of them. It's just it embodies everything that the Skywalker saga is showing us, from Anakin to his transition to Vader, and now you're implementing the Clone Wars characters and now these new Rebels characters into it. It's so awesome.
Absolutely, dude. If nothing else, then I guess now comes the part where we bring a close to our discussion of this current episode of Star Wars Rebels. And moving forward, I'd like to remind everybody once again to please like, share, subscribe, and rate. And one thing I haven't said in a while is, for you traditional podcast listeners, you can find us anywhere you find your podcasts, whether it be Apple iTunes, whether it be Google Play Store, Spotify, Podbean, Overcast. We're on all of them. Just search for Good Morning Lothal, the unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast. So if there's nothing else, Rolly, then looking forward for next episode will be season 2, episode 3. It's called The Lost Commanders. So we will see what that brings us next week. So in the meantime, if nothing else, that has been Pete Salas along with
Rolando Zamora,
saying, may the force be with you always. Goodbye from Lothal.